Okay, so I think we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Melissa Masline English. I'm the Assistant Director of our Office of Student Services in the Saunders College of Business, and I am joined by three of our alumni, and we're going to get started by having them introduce themselves, having them tell us what they studied, any of the co-ops you did while you were at RIT, and then kind of a little bit about your career path to this point. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see you guys. So if I'll have Scott, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so hello, one and all. Scott Laura Tan, graduated from RIT in 1984. Seems like, in fact, it is a lifetime ago, I guess. Um, I've been with the same company for 41 years now. I've worked through many different roles and responsibilities, from operations to sales. I've been in client retention work. I've deployed projects. I've worked in group strategy as well as domestic strategy, and have just kind of managed my way through the organization. My current role, well, it's just changed. So what you saw is partially correct. I'm still responsible for performance management for Sodexo. We're a 23 billion euro organization based in Paris, France. My responsibility has been to measure the performance of the organization, both the operational performance and the performance against our strategic ambition. But it's recently changed where I picked up the role of global head of data governance and analytics. So certainly through my career, I think you've seen a lot of changes. I've had to stretch into different positions, different roles and responsibilities. And I credit RIT with giving me the ability to flex, to continue to learn and adapt myself to take advantage of these opportunities. While at RIT, I did participate in two separate co-ops. One was with the Walt Disney World Corporation, as I was a hotel restaurant major, and the other was with a hotel in Western New York, down in Olean, Cove Castle Incorporated. At the time, it was called the Castle Inn Hotel. Very valuable experiences. The other piece I would add is I do have an MBA, and I got the MBA from Penn State University. So a little bit about me in 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank
So,
you.
Ruben, I think I'll toss it over to you because you are next in my screen.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Scott. Funny, my brother got married at the castle. My sister,
Whoa!
my sister-in-law is from Olean. That's so funny to hear that when you say that. And you
Yeah.
got me by a year because I graduated in '85, so I don't feel
Wow.
like the old fart anymore on these. I'm not sure, Terrell, where you are, but usually come in as the old guy. Anyway, um, I graduated in '85 with a BS in electrical engineering, and then I came back in '94 to '96 for an EMBA. In between then, I got a graduate degree in mechanical engineering from Rensselaer Polytech. Um, when I was at RIT on the campus, I interviewed with IBM and was fortunate enough. Back then, IBM was a great company. It still is, don't misunderstand me, but I mean, they were, kind of like the pinnacle. All my buddies were jealous that I got a job there as a co-op. I spent 5 co-ops there, had a whole lot of fun, a lot of hands-on work I did there. Um, as I was in my EMBA program, I had transitioned. The reason I was in Rochester, that was all in East Fishkill, New York, and Poughkeepsie, New York. I actually started my career designing memory chips. and then went into building mainframe computers. But I transitioned to sales. IBM was going through a lot of changes then. Gerstner took over and wanted to get close to the customer. So huge change for me going into sales. Didn't know squat about it. It was all relationship selling. And that I spent 13 years total in both in manufacturing and sales. Got a little disillusioned. I was traveling around everywhere because the marketing was changing and it was production industry, so I could go anywhere. And I was at cities all over the place. Meanwhile, I was trying to raise a family, and so I had one of my customers recruited me into Bristol Myers, and I went into medical devices and pharmaceuticals for the next 20 years. And I worked at Bristol Myers, Sanofi, Cardinal Health, some big guys, a couple startups in there. And then the last 10 years, I've been running my own company. I started the company with my neighbor, and we build dryers for smart phones, hearing aids, and anything electronic.
Thank you. And last but not least, Terrell.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So Terrell Carswell, got my undergraduate in management and information systems in 1999. Um, did a couple of co-ops. First co-op was I should also add that I started off as undeclared business, right? And so I went to high school in New York, went to Brooklyn Tech. We chose majors our junior year. So I was a computer science major. And the reason why I didn't choose a technology degree is because I didn't want to program, right? And so was always interested in business, had an aptitude for business, and ended up undeclared business. And then as I was going through and determining what I wanted to major in, MIS ended up being my choice to bridge business and technology. Um, Technology was growing, the reliance on technology to conduct business was growing. And in my mind, I thought if I got a degree in MIS, I can work on the technology side or the business side or in the middle, right, as the bridge. And so it would make me marketable going forward. So my first co-op was at the Pittsburgh Federal Credit Union, where I basically wrote automation scripts to automate processes. So opening an account, mortgage payment, things along those lines, instead of them having to write all these commands, GUI pop up, they put in the numbers, everything's done behind the scenes. So did that for my first co-op. Second co-op was at Eastman Kodak, and ended up working on some database work related to year 2000, which seems like a very, very long time ago. And then decided to work at Kodak full time. So was there for about 6 years ago. Was fortunate to get a lot of growth in a short period of time. So I wrote code, was a team lead for people writing code, managed projects for a line of business, ended up going into my first leadership role in telecom, then left IT and took a role in customer service and logistics to grow my business acumen skills, and then cycled back into IT security. And when I cycled back, the plan was to cycle into a role where we were doing like project delivery, so leading folks that manage projects for businesses, but that role wasn't available. And so the most interesting of the three options I had was in IT security, and then I've been in security related roles for the last 20 years. So left Kodak and now I'm at Bank of America. Been at Bank of America for 20 years. I joined the bank to lead ATM physical security, so alarms, video monitoring, protecting the physical asset, and all the security and operations behind that. So that was my first 4 years or so. Then felt like it was time to do something different, but they actually expanded my role and moved my role from tech and ops into the business, which you typically don't see a security role in the business, but kept all of those functions, but took on ATM fraud. So ATM skimming was on the rise in the US, where they put devices on the readers because the US was the last large country to move to chip cards, and then worked on the transition migrating from magstripe to chip, et cetera. And I also had data and information security. So I sat on the other side of the table from our global information security organization. So that takes me about 9 years in. And then I transitioned into our global information security organization, which is where I sit now, in what we call our business information security office. And what we do is we're aligned to technology teams and businesses to help them manage information security risks. I describe it as we need to speak three languages: technology, infosec, and business acumen. And quite often we have to translate those in the same conversation. So over the past 10 or so years, I've supported different areas with growing level of responsibility. Currently, I lead the team that supports all of consumer, retail, preferred, and wealth management. So all of our customer facing applications and businesses. So anything you probably see on TV related to ATMs or checking savings accounts, my team supports the technology and the businesses. And again, excited to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you all. You guys have a wealth of knowledge behind you, so really looking forward to learning from you tonight. For our guests on, this is hopeful to be a discussion panel, so we invite you to ask questions. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom to submit your questions. And to kick it off, I think, I'll gear this first question towards Scott and Terrell because you both did your undergrad degrees in the College of Business. Why did you choose to come to the Saunders College of Business for your studies?
Scott, you want to start?
Sure, Terrell. Why did I choose RIT? Well, there were a few reasons. At the time, I actually spent the first 2 years at a small school in the Adirondacks, Paul Smith College. I had an associate's degree. There, I learned a lot about the business, the restaurant hotel business, but I really felt that I needed a stronger business background than restaurant hotel. And as I looked at my alternatives, I looked at several universities, several schools. I was from Western New York, and I really appreciated the notion that RIT, with that focus on IT, was going to bring a different dimension to my learning. And I found it to be very true. So I could have gone to a different university, a different college, and had a very strong business track. But I felt that by going to RIT, I would be able to gain a more diverse learning experience. And back in the 1980s, I thought information technology was going to be a thing. And hence, I thought that RIT was the perfect fit for me. Rigorous academics, broad base of knowledge that I could learn from, and I thought it would propel me to do great things. Terrell?
So thanks, Scott. So for me, one of the reasons why I was interested in business, because I mentioned sort of the technology aptitude, studying computer science in high school, and then the business interest was I had an interest in law, right? So, in terms of wanting to be a lawyer, what have you. But then I took a step back and looked at what were the characteristics and attributes of why I was interested in law. So it was, you know, a lot of it can be done in business in terms of negotiation, understanding sort of end to end, right? Engaging with people. And so that led me to wanting to go to a business school from an undergraduate perspective. RIT was on the radar, interestingly enough, because my brother actually graduated from RIT. So he was initially a electrical engineering major and then ended up going into MIS, right? And was the person that actually convinced me to consider MIS when I said I didn't want to be a programmer, and he explained to me what MIS actually was. And so the other option I was considering was NYU. I'm originally from Brooklyn, as I mentioned, and didn't really want to go to school in New York City, right? Wanted to sort of get an experience outside of New York City. And I think Saunders was great for me because, I think that my RIT experience in general was a crash course in life. Like it's a very diverse school, people from literally all over the world. And then when I was undeclared business, I got a lot of the foundational business courses under my belt. And then I chose my major pretty late, like late, I think it was like late second, early third year. And so when I took my technology courses, I was able to ground them, like ground myself from a business perspective and apply the technology aspect and learn the the technology, whether it was programming language, database, et cetera, et cetera. So it ended up being a really good fit for me. And then the value going forward is a lot of what Scott said, right? Um, the balance and blend of business and technology. I think RIT did a great job back when I was in school, and I think they do an outstanding job now.
Thank you both. So our next question, and I'll open it up to any of you who would like to answer, is how did your RIT education aid with your career track and your trajectory?
I'll jump in there. So, Scott, similar to you, I actually went to Alfred State, a 2-year school, down below there in Rochester. And similar to you, I'm from Western New York, also Dunkirk. Um, Obviously, electrical engineering going into IBM, at the time, arguably the biggest, largest, most advanced computer company in the world. Yeah, that helped my career track tremendously. And it was funny when I was at IBM. Um, you could always tell they recruited heavily from RIT, RPI, and gosh, I forget the other one on the other side. It's south of Lake Ontario. I forget the name of it now. But you could always tell RIT grads or RIT kids that were in school. They were sharp, they were hands-on, and that stayed with me. I actually have a lab. I'm in my basement. I have a lab right over here that it's a real hands-on experience I had with IBM or with RIT. Can't understate the value of co-op. Co-op taught me what I didn't want to do, not so much as what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I would say that the co-op was instrumental. So if you think about it, I worked at a small credit union, which was $150 million in assets at the time, and then was able to do a co-op there, and then went to, at the time, a Fortune 500 company at Kodak, right? So I was able to see the aspect of a small organization, large organization. At the time when I was at RIT, the College of Business was being run via the concept of total quality management, right? Which is sort of quality management methodology. And so it was embedded into the curriculum. So not only was the school run efficiently because they used the methodology, we learned about the methodology. So in my co-op and when I graduated, it was not only the technology skills and the business skills, the process skills have been influential throughout my entire career. So whether it's a process that I own for my team, if I'm part of a broader process, I naturally just look at end to end and upstream, downstream impact. And I didn't realize I was doing that early in my career naturally. And now I'm very intentional about it and very intentional about whether I mentor or coaching my team, that understanding upstream, downstream is very important so that you don't operate in a siloed fashion, right? And it typically causes inefficiency somewhere upstream, downstream if you're acting in a siloed fashion. So to me, that was instrumental. And then the second thing, one of my most instrumental classes that I referred to very, very often was organizational behavior. So the people dynamic of organizations, irrespective of the business and technology, for me has been very beneficial throughout my career, from co-op to moving to the executive level.
Very good. For me, what did I learn at RIT that really has helped me in my career? Um, as opposed to Terrell, I think Terrell said he's a New York City guy. I grew up in small towns, very small towns, and I moved around a lot. I went to a very small 2-year school at Paul Smith College, so I was a bit insulated. And when I went to RIT, it helped me believe or helped me learn and feel that I actually belonged. And it helped me to personally grow and develop and better understand what it meant to be a responsible human being. Because before that, being that small town kid, you just always question, can I make it in this world? So that was one thing that RIT gave to me. A second thing that RIT gave to me was this just passion and joy to learn, to be truly challenged, to fail and figure out that, in fact, the setback, it's not the end, it's a setup for a comeback. And these are the life lessons that are so difficult. I can talk about the statistics class where we had a midterm and a final. Well, I scored a 50 on the midterm, came back and got a 96 on the final and passed the class. One of those situations in life that you just learn from. So RIT, it taught me how to be me. It taught me how to learn how to fail and to come back from that failure. It gave me a real sense of belonging, and it really gave me that passion, that love of learning that didn't make me afraid when I had these non-traditional opportunities in the future. The other piece I would add that RIT brought to me was learning alongside so many individuals with differences. And when I say differences, it's different heritage, it's different abilities. And all of these things just really came together to kind of galvanize the person that I was meant to be. Can't say enough great things about RIT, obviously.
RIT is sure one of those places where you come and you never want to leave.
No.
You know, I think you all mentioned or referenced how the co-op played some portion toward your career track while you were at RIT. So my next question is, how did your co-op experience prepare you for where you are now? And I'd like to start with Ruben because you actually mentioned in your last answer that it helped you figure out what you didn't want to do. So maybe tying that in a little bit.
Yeah. So I did all my co-ops at IBM. And the reason that is well, I had an opportunity to go do a co-op at GE, and it was at the time, GE was awarded a program for the MX missile, and I just didn't, and it was working on inertial guidance systems, and I just didn't feel right about being able to plant a nuclear bomb 50 yards closer to someone's city. So I said, no, I'm not doing it. So I did all my co-ops at IBM, and it was so big that they were all different. Obviously, there was different departments, and probably my favorite one, my least favorite was quality engineering when I went into that. I mean, it was a lot of paperwork. It was a lot of saying no, telling people no, you can't do that. Following specifications, which was great. It taught me a lot. But the one I really liked was, working in a lab and doing failure analysis. So finding out how things fail and finding the root cause. And that kind of tied in with my RIT lab experience. I mean, we had great labs there, and I know I'm leaning on the engineering side of it, but it was just a really, really good tie-in from RIT to IBM. And both of them, I couldn't wait to get back to class. I couldn't wait to go co-op to demonstrate what I just learned, and then come back, practical skills back to back to RIT. It was just an awesome experience, it really was. Wouldn't trade it for the world. I'd do the same thing.
Thank you. Did Scott or Terrell, did either of you feel that you had a particular co-op experience that really helped to prepare for you for where you are now?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I call up that Pittsburgh Federal Credit Union, also Kodak, but I'll use an example from Kodak, and I think the lessons here was confidence in the power of networking, and the fact that we all have a voice regardless of the level of the company. And so what happened was there was it was like a monthly session, and it was called Straight Talk with the CIO of the company. So anybody can go, and it was open forum, and you just sort of chatted. So my manager took me and another co-op, so we go there, what have you, and we she introduced us to, well, no, while we during the session, she introduced us, put us on the spot, and then we had to sort of say what we do and talk about our experience, what have you. So afterwards, we go over and we meet him, right? So we go meet John and whatnot, and then um, he says to both of us, "Look, if you ever want to chat, just reach out." And so when we got back to the office, my manager was like, "He means that." And I'm like, well, that's the CIO of a Fortune 500 company. Like, why would he want to talk to a co-op, right? And so I'm at my desk, and I dialed his number. Now I'm a co-op. I didn't know how all of this works, so I dialed his number, and his executive assistant picks up. So she picks up, and then she was like, "Hey, could you hold on for a minute?" So I'm on hold, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, I just called the CIO of this company, asking to get on the calendar. So I hung up the phone. True story, hung up. So she calls me back. I pick up, and then I'm like, hello, and it's her, what have you. I was like, hey, we must have got disconnected, which was true to an extent. I didn't say that I actually did the disconnecting, right? And so ended up setting up time, and then the CIO actually became one of my mentors and one of the most instrumental people in my entire career, right? And he knows the story. But there was a level of courage to make the first phone call. Luckily she called me back. But then how um generous he was with his time and pouring into me was foundational into how I approach mentoring others today. Because I truly believe that my career is bigger than me. And so as I've been fortunate enough to progress in my career, passing that on and helping others throughout their path is very important. Hence why we're all, part of this panel. And so those were seeds that was planted during that interaction that I still try to water today.
Awesome. Thank you guys. That's a great story, Terrell. Um, so, thinking back to the beginning of your college careers, you know, several of you talked about transferring, but what do you think was the most challenging part of jumping into college for you?
I have a story. So, um, public speaking was not something I gravitated to, right? And so, senior year of high school, final for speech, I walked to the door. I was so nervous. I put my hand on the knob and I cut class because I was so nervous. And luckily, my teacher let me make it up, as I'll probably still be in high school. So, but nonetheless, I was very nervous. So then, within Saunders, like the College of Business, we have freshman seminar. So like the first class that you're in college, they want you to go up and introduce yourself in like the next class. So like you're up speaking in public and woefully uncomfortable. Like, you know, just go up, say your name, where you're from, very, very uncomfortable. And so as time went on, I tried to add things where, try to scan the crowd, and just, continue to develop my public speaking skills. And so having to do presentations and different things like that, not only if it was by myself or if it was with a group, again, was very challenging to me. But I think, RIT helped me develop that skill and sort of get over that fear. And that's been foundational to, I know all of us can probably agree having to public speak and do presentations is foundational regardless of what career you go into. But that was really a challenge for me where like whenever I had to do it, it was a legitimate fear. And, I no longer have it, else I probably wouldn't be on this panel right now, even though it's virtual. So that is one that stands out to me. I think the way the curriculum was structured and creating those safe spaces, was very, very beneficial to me.
Very good. And Melissa, I would add for me, the greatest challenge, and I would say it's more moving to RIT, but it was academic rigor because they really pushed us and prioritization. Everything is important. How do I truly prioritize and organize myself to ensure that I am doing the best I can be doing? And those were two things that it took me a couple of, at the time we were in trimesters, I think, but it took me a couple of trimesters to get through that to better understand how do I best spend my time in order to excel in school.
Yeah, for me, it was a couple of different stories. I absolutely had a fear of speaking, and I got over that pretty quick when I got into sales. But when I transferred from Alfred into RIT, I mean, Alfred was a good technical school. RIT was up here, and I learned very quickly that there was no sloughing off because there was a lot of smart kids there that I rubbed elbows with. And of course, engineering, everything was graded on a curve. And I really, really took to heart. I treated it like a job every day. I mean, yeah, there was a Friday night or a Saturday night we had a few pops, but I mean, every night I was studying, and it really forced me to be a rigorous student and to study as much as I could.
Thank you all for sharing some of those vulnerabilities from those early days. I think it really helps to hear that when others are struggling, that you're not alone and that it's not uncommon to have those adjustment periods. So, kind of jumping from the hard side of college, maybe to some of the more fun side of it, what were some of your favorite business classes or classes in general while you were at RIT? And in addition, were there any classes that best prepared you for co-op or your professional careers? And they could be two separate things.
All right. So my favorite class, Wines of the World. Strongly recommend it. I think everyone at RIT should go through this program because it helps me in so many ways, even still today. So, favorite class by far, Wines of the World. Look it up. I encourage you to sign up for that class. But beyond that, for me, because my career has spanned so many different disciplines, marketing. Certainly, the marketing class, when I moved into a marketing role, I reflected back on marketing 201, 301, 401. A lot of the basic premise of marketing was critical. I mentioned statistics before. It was a hard class, but it helped me learn how to think. And that's something that RIT will do for you. Operations management, of course, because I spent the first 20 years of my career in operations, just understanding the theory behind operations and then actually going out into the world and applying what I learned. So all of these classes were incredibly valuable for me and benefited me in my career. And I still reference some of the work that I did back then as I'm talking to teams today.
Yeah, I would say, I think I mentioned earlier, organizational behavior. Um, Operations management is another one that was really good. And I'd still reference some of the things today, right, in terms of the mindset or what have you. Um, it was interesting because when I chose MIS the next quarter, because Scott mentioned we was on core quarters as well, I took Visual Basic. And after that class, the I targeted doing a co-op writing code in Visual Basic, and from the person that didn't want to be a programmer, right? And so, and I'll give a shout out to Dr. Parati because he's actually still at RIT. He was my Visual Basic teacher, and so that was what led me to my first internship at the Pittsburgh Federal Credit Union, writing code in Visual Basic to automate processes there. Um, Also, I recall systems analysis and design, understanding the systems development lifecycle. That was foundational, as well as project management, where some of the foundations there in terms of managing time and effort can you can translate that into real life, right? And so that was another influential one. And then I also enjoyed psychology and sociology, right? And when I think of those classes and combine them with organizational behavior, that was probably me not knowingly preparing myself for leadership. And so those are some of the classes that stand out.
Ruben, you're muted.
Apologize about that. For me, of course, I came into sales at IBM. That's when I started my EMBA. And, I felt I needed to catch up. So that's why I jumped into an MBA program is, I'm rubbing elbows with these business guys every day. And, I don't even know how I'm getting paid. So finance was a good one. Accounting, stats, that was the engineering me. Loved economics. We had an economics professor, M. Richard Rose. He came from, I think, the University of Chicago. He was a pretty smart guy. marketing. And then, on the fun side, state and local politics. I look back finally at that, and I met a couple college roommates there, and it was a really good class. Taught me a lot about how things really work, and in general, it was all those classes.
Wonderful, thank you. It's always fun to hear about the classes that you enjoyed, both from within your majors, but also some of those electives you got to take. Definitely can utilize those electives to do some fun things. So my next question would be, what, I feel like you answered this one. So if you had to provide one piece of advice for our attendees regarding co-op or career preparedness, what would you share with them?
Well, just speaking from my own personal experiences, is I put myself in a lot of uncomfortable positions. At IBM and outside IBM, jumping into medical devices. I remember I was worried sick. I had a job offer going into Bristol Myers Squibb, and it took me 2 weeks. I lay awake in bed for 2 weeks. And I finally told my wife, and the guy that recruited me, he said, I said, well, what happens if there's a recession? That's what I was worried about. I had two young kids, and he goes, Ruben, it's medical devices. It's never a recession for medical devices. But it's I'd say not being afraid to jump into new things. If you have the tools in your tool bag that RIT gives you, you'll succeed at anything, to be honest. So, I mean, it just of course I had failures, but hey, you got to get back up on that horse and jump right on it and get back in the game.
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, as you think about co-ops and opportunities, aim high. Often at least I would doubt myself, and I would wonder, am I really what they're looking for? And in fact, I think you always want to go into it thinking about, well, is this what I want? And then just have goals, have targets, aim high. And the worst thing that happens is it doesn't work out, and you'll find that you'll land eventually in someplace pretty good. So don't let fear, I think, similar to Ruben, don't let fear limit your potential.
Along the same lines, I would say that a your career is a journey, right? It's the aggregate of the jobs and experiences that you have over time. And if you've noticed, all about three stories, none of us predicted them, and it was twists and turns. There was opportunities that came up that we didn't expect. Like I took a job that wasn't even a target job and ended up in the security space for 20 plus years. And so I say that because, choosing a co-op and especially choosing the first full-time job out of undergrad, we put a lot of pressure on choosing the perfect job or the right job or what have you, right? You're very likely, hopefully be fortunate enough to have multiple good decisions. It's probably not a wrong answer because it's a journey, right? Like and even if you ask me what my next job is, I wouldn't give you a job. I would give you characteristics and attributes of a job so you don't rule out things you never ruled in. So as you look at opportunities, your majors may end up setting you up for typical jobs. But if you look at it from characteristics and attributes, there may be other things that might be of interest, or a job that you may not have considered, or a job that didn't exist today that's created tomorrow that might be an option. So, you know, don't unintentionally remove some of your flexibility there by trying to get it perfect. If the aggregate of skills will position you for different things, and over time, you're almost guaranteed to look back to say, hey, that was a turn or a role in my career that I didn't predict. It might have been the most pivotal one.
Thank you. Um, So I have one more question. I will then start asking our audience's questions. So I encourage you guys to please ask our panelists some questions here. So my last formal question for you guys, is there one experience that you still reflect upon from your co-op or college experience today that either had a positive or negative experience? Well, it could have been a positive or negative experience, and how did this experience help you grow professionally?
So my experience, it was a negative that I used to be a positive. So I was taking a class, and it was an English class. And the teacher said, "So, Scott, what are you thinking? Where do you want to be? What do you want to do?" And I said, I think because, gosh, I was what, 20 at the time. I said, I'd really like to do strategy for a global Fortune 500 company. The professor laughed at me and he said, Scott, there are only so many jobs like that. Very doubtful you're going to land in something like that. You may want to manage your expectations. Never forgot it. Still remember it to this day. And the day I was offered a job leading global strategy for a Fortune 50 company with more than 435,000 global employees, I reflected back on that conversation and just smiled. So sometimes things that happen that are negative can motivate you and can it really just drove me to say, you know what? I'm going to show him. And I never circle back to say, haha, guess what? But it just lit this fire inside of me that drove me to achieve not only that goal, and that was 15 years ago, but I moved on from there and done so many other things. Now, I'm a graduate from the Hotel Restaurant Management School. And today I'm leading global performance management for a Fortune 50 company. And 2 weeks ago, they asked me to pick up this role of global head of data and analytics governance. I've never worked with data analytics and data governance before, but it's that education from RIT and that motivation that I got from that one encounter with that professor that really helped drive me to achieve a lot of what I've done. So a negative turned into a positive.
So I'll go. So for me, um, it would have been late into my second year. Um, and I forget exactly which court it was, but there were some things going on back home. My mother was dealing with some illness and at the time, and with an illness at the time, and I was distracted, right? And so wasn't as focused in school as I should be, and didn't have a good quarter, right? And ended up on academic probation, right? And was closer than I should have been. Well, I should have been academic probation, but was like in the neighborhood of academic suspension, right? Which would have lost financial aid and everything like that. And so that was a lot to deal with at the time. But then I had to reprioritize and focus, right? And what it taught me is that, different things happen in life and leveraging your support system, which I wasn't doing at the time because a lot of things I wasn't really talking about, right? And so, leveraging your support systems, family, friends, support system, at school, what have you. And the very next quarter, I made the dean's list. And so, and then from there, I think the quarter after that, I went on co-op, and then, I told you a little bit about the journey there. So like, it was at a point where if I didn't, and I think 2 quarters in on academic probation would have led to suspension. And so, coming from very humble beginnings in Brooklyn and now having the possibility of, getting a college education, gone really lit a fire, right? And so that experience, I think, was a there was a lifelong learning there, right? Because as you go through life, you balance different things, and families, friend, personal work, what have you, and it's sometimes noted as cliche in terms of work-life balance, but it's a real thing, right? And so we have to make sure we're focused on the important things. And then as time goes on, time management shifts to priority management because there's not going to be enough time to do everything. And so, how I was able to make the dean's list the next quarter after coming from a low had a lot to do with understanding priority management and then leveraging my support system and not trying to take everything on myself.
So for me, there was, we obviously, as electrical engineers, we took electronics courses, and electronics is more than just putting a couple transistors together on a breadboard. It's understanding all the mathematical theory that goes into semiconductors, and it's complicated. And I remember I worked really, really hard, and we had a midterm test or whatever. You had 3 tests throughout the quarter. If you guys were in quarters, I knew you were, Scott. I can't remember, Terrell, if it was quarters then. But I mean, I mean, it was a really tough test. I thought I did really bad. I forgot what I got. I may have got an 85 on it. It turned out that was the highest grade in the class. And I was sulking around thinking that like I was going to get kicked out, not kicked out, but have to drop that class. There was a bunch of my friends that I saw they were dropping the class. And one of the TAs came up to me and said, "What are you sulking around for? You got the highest grade on that test." And I was like, whoa, maybe this hayseed from Dunkirk isn't so dumb after all, and this hard work really pays off. So I'll never forget that. It was actually kind of a turning point, and it would kind of institutionalize the fact that the school has really taught me something. And it's taught me a lot about hard work and being around smart people, and how to hit adversity.
Thank you all for sharing. So we do have a question in the chat here from our audience, which is wonderful. And Terrell, you had mentioned that you started in our business exploration program. So if you have anything to add to this, I would love to hear your perspective. If not, I can certainly answer the question. So it says within Saunders, at what point do you have to decide on a specific business major? I'll say from an administrative perspective, you have to decide by the end of your second year. But then it says, do you start with general classes first before you have to decide? And how do you help students get a taste of each major before deciding? So, Terrell, do you want to talk about how you explored to come to MIS maybe a little more?
Sure. And back when I was in school, it was similar. You had to choose by the end of your second year. And so I took classes across the board. I took, marketing, finance, accounting. Some were required, but I used my college of business elective just to explore, right? And I think I was leaning towards management or marketing. That was a two. And so I sort of double clicked and, took a couple level courses in those two areas, until, my brother, we had a conversation around MIS. But, so it was a combination of exploring the two areas I was interested in, but not ruling out the other areas and taking courses in those areas just to make sure I wasn't overlooking something. You're on mute, Melissa.
Thank you. Just to expand on that a little bit, and certainly thank you for that perspective. Students can apply to RIT either directly into a business major, such as, accounting, finance, supply chain, marketing, management, information systems, hospitality, or they can choose to go in with business exploration, which gives the student the option to spend their first 2 years exploring with our general business curriculum, which everybody has to take regardless of major before picking. So you get the exposure to all of the majors or have the opportunity to get exposure to all of the majors before picking your choice of degree. So you can go either direction there.
The other thing I would add, Melissa, is that it didn't feel like I was losing time, right? Because some
Like,
folks may think, well, because I'm choosing later, you know, second quarter or second year, that you lost time. I didn't feel that way because, like you said, there's courses you need to take anyway, and some of the ones where I took the next level up, I use it as an elective. So again, I didn't lose any time. I just
mhm.
took the time to make an informed decision.
And I believe lately, just from a statistical standpoint, about 40% of our incoming students come in with business exploration. So it is pretty common. Um, I'm biased, but I think that's one of the best things you can do for yourself is give yourself the opportunity to explore. We have another question, which is how was the transition to your first career and what did it feel like and how did you manage the shift?
This is out of college or out of from one job to another job?
I'm interpreting this as from college to your first full-time job.
Um, well, for me, it was welcome to the real world. I graduated in the mid 80s and interest rates were like 12%. Scott, you probably remember that if you tried to buy a house. I'm not sure, Terrell, what they were when you got out, but I mean, it was, I think I started at $28,572 a year. That was the starting salary. And, it was a bit of a struggle. But that's why I sought a graduate degree. I was working with a bunch of other engineers that had graduate degrees, and I'm like, there's more to this. I need to keep learning. And so it was jump into a couple years. I played a little softball at night, worked real hard at the job, but then I said, it's time to get back into school and keep this lifelong learning going.
Yeah, my first job out of university, out of college, was with Marriott Corporation. Um, and I was graduating. The way Marriott did it back in the 80s is that we had orientation with a lot of other individual students who had graduated and were just starting with the organization. And I felt when I met the other students that I was incredibly well prepared for the career journey that I was about to embark upon. I felt that I had as good, if not a better foundation than some of the kids from the elite hospitality schools, the Cornell universities, the UNLVs, even dare I say, the Penn States, where I got my MBA from. But I felt as though I was, if not as prepared, maybe more prepared than they were. Certainly, life does come at you fast, but from a transition perspective, I felt I was ready. I walked in, I was confident, and it felt pretty darn good. Of course, yeah, I had to pay the rent and the bills and all of that, but I think we all go through that experience as well.
Yeah, I would say having done a co-op at Kodak, and then I actually worked part-time over the next 2 quarters until I graduated. Um, that helped with the transition because I was already, sort of familiar with the company. It was a new manager and a new team, but at the time, Kodak was doing a lot of hiring off of the campuses. So as Scott mentioned, you sort of had a cohort that you went in with, and so, not only in terms of orientation, but like there would be different activities and different things like that. So, they were very intentional about how they were bringing folks in. The other thing I was fortunate to get involved in is because they were doing a lot of hiring, I actually got involved with recruiting and interviewing really right off to the college campus. So like the fall after I graduated, I was going out and interviewing people and, interviewing people when they came to Kodak for full-time roles. And so what that helped me with was not only coming in with my cohort, establishing relationships with folks that had been in the company for a while. But then I had a cohorts coming behind me that I was able to influence and mentor. And so I was able to not only grow as an individual and people pouring into me, I was fortunate to pour into others early in my career. And so that's always bi-directional, right? So like I'll put a plug in for folks whether you're um, getting mentored or interested in mentoring is always bi-directional, right? And so that was also foundational for me early on in my career as well. And then it was also, I think, as kind of Ruben mentioned, you sort of get your salary number and then you get your take home, and there's a big difference. And you're like, wait a minute, after I pay rent and everything, and school loans is not as much left as I thought. So I think we're all shell shocked by that. But then that gets into um, making sure you're upping your budgeting game. So
Makes you work harder.
indeed.
Well, did any of the three of you study abroad?
I did not.
No.
I did not, but the last 15 years of my career, I've lived in Tampa, Florida area, but I work in Paris, France. So I think studying abroad, back in the 80s for Ruben and I, it wasn't really an option. It wasn't a thing. But if you have the opportunity, I know we have the Croatia campus and others, I strongly encourage you to take advantage. The world is very small, and learning how to work across multiple nationalities will benefit you greatly as your career arc progresses. So please take a look at it. It is working internationally is very different than working domestically, just because people think, they process, they work differently, and this would help you better understand what all of that means in a tangible way. So go, go, go.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I haven't I didn't study abroad. I haven't had to live in another country for work, but I've led global teams most of my career. And so, navigating the nuances of different countries, a culture, things of that nature, um, will serve you well. But being able to do that in person, I think, is a great opportunity. So I'm always impressed, and whenever I'm talking to prospective, students or people considering our RIT, I always mention the opportunity to study abroad. And if I were there today, I would look to take advantage of those opportunities without a doubt.
So our question that prompted my question was what percentage of business students choose to study abroad, and does doing so create any challenges? I'm going to be honest, I don't know the percentage of our students that study abroad. If I had to go off of gut and anecdotal conversations, I'd guess somewhere between 10 and 15% of our business students study abroad. It is, it does not create any challenges outside of wanting to be additionally proactive and communicating early with your academic advisors to plan for it. But academically, the feasibility of doing it within the Saunders College of Business is very easy. Well, I think all three of you, Terrell, Scott, Ruben, it has been a pleasure chatting with you tonight. Thank you for your insights and the knowledge you imparted with our attendees. And I hope everybody has a wonderful night.
Great. Thank you,
Yep.
Melissa. To the students, you made a great choice. Go Tigers.
You better believe it. Thanks, Melissa. Good luck to you
Indeed.
guys and the students.
Indeed. Good luck. Thanks for having us. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.